Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. As I always say, please do tell us where in the world you are. I love to see all the different places people are tuning in from. I'm Catherine Mattice, founder and CEO of Civility Partners. We work with organizations to create positive, thriving work environments. Today, I have Zovig Garboushian, and I'm so glad I feel like I said that right. She's the CEO of Boldness, Ablaze Coaching. She's a speaker. She's an executive coach. We met on the speaking circuit and became fast friends. And you focus on coaching women in leadership specifically. And I love how you say your core essence is being a truth seeker and a strategic fire starter. I love that. Love it. So tell us a little bit about how you got into coaching women specifically, and then I have a bunch of other questions for you.
Yeah, sure. So I think it was probably always in me to do that because I had a whole corporate career before I became a coach. But I noticed that I always had these side hustles that were in support of women. So for several years, I was a personal stylist and shopper, and I wanted to work with women who had gone through a dramatic weight loss because that was something that I experienced, and that can kind of mess with your head. And then I started teaching yoga. And while I loved all of my students, I realized that I was really there to help empower the women in their bodies through the practice of yoga. And then and then I shifted into consulting. And when I did that, I realized I really gravitated toward, and they gravitated toward me, women in leadership. And it just kind of hit me one day where it's like, what are you doing? You've been cozying up to this for a long time.
Yeah.
And why don't you just do what you know you're meant to do? And so that's when I decided to become a coach. And it was pretty clear to me that the priority and the primary audience that I wanted to work with was women in leadership. I do have some clients who are men, actually. I don't market to them, but when they come to me and are interested in coaching, it's something I get super excited about. But my focus is on helping women get more connected to the core essence of who they are so that they can lead with less worry and more ease.
I love that. And by the way, we've got people from Texas, Pittsburgh, Delaware, Ireland. Welcome, everyone. Please do put comments and questions in the chat. I love to pull those in. So if you have any questions or comments, by all means, share them. I'm curious about the men's situation. Is there something about them that they're drawn to a coach who usually focuses on women, or?
I've actually never asked that question specifically, but the men who I coach are open and willing and interested and curious about themselves, because that's really where I focus. I don't really coach much on the what to do. We do some tactical things in coaching, of course, but the primary focus isn't on the what, it's on the who. And so the clients who I coach who are men are really interested in who they are and what they're doing and what they're about and why they are the way they are and how they can maximize and leverage. And to be honest, they face many of the same things that women face. It just looks different.
Sure.
It just looks and feels different. But, there's self-doubt and inner narrative and all that going on with everybody. And I think it just appears different on the outside.
I would suspect one of the differences is that they feel less able to talk about it, whereas women, maybe not at work in a room full of C-suite executives, but with our friends and certainly other women colleagues. I mean, I just told you a struggle I had right before.
Yeah, that's right.
We locked up. I don't know you that well, but
that's right.
I feel like women are more inclined to open up and share their shit, for lack of a
better. Yeah, this is true. And the men who I coach are very open, and I hear very personal and vulnerable things. And to be honest, you got to be vulnerable in coaching, because if you're not putting it all on the table, you're not going to get much out of it. So I support that, encourage it, and I invite it in, and I'm there for it.
I love that. Yeah. So on that same note about differences between men and women, what are some of the differences that you see beyond maybe feeling it's okay to be more vulnerable? What are some of the other differences between men and women and how they lead?
Well, I think one of the first ones, which is something we probably all see, I hope we all see, is that there are just fewer of women in leadership. Many of my clients are one of a couple or the only one in the boardroom. And honestly, I don't care how confident you are. When you are the only one in a situation, it is hard. it can shake you, it can rattle you, it can make you question yourself. So I think by sheer numbers, that's a big difference. And it affects how we think, and it affects what we say to ourselves, and we may question ourselves more in those moments. This is not, and by the way, what I'm saying is not blanket statement for everybody. This is what I have experienced and what I've experienced with my clients. The other thing that I notice about women is that women have a wonderful ability to have what I call global vision. They see everything. And by seeing everything, I don't just mean what's happening in front of them, but the stuff that's not visible, the emotion, the subtlety, the energy in the room, that kind of stuff. We see all of that. And so I think, the women that I work with, and I think, by the way, I think everybody has this ability. I don't think this is just like a superpower of women, but I think women are naturally tuned in this way. But these skills aren't celebrated the way making quick decisions are, or being aggressive is celebrated. And it's a shame, because the fact that a woman can walk into a room and just assess the temperament, the energy, who's feeling what, and how to respond to those things is highly powerful. Right. And in addition to doing that, on the unseen level, we're also incredibly analytical. It allows us to be more analytical, more clear about the decisions that we make. So I feel like we have this sort of holistic ability to lead. And what I hope to do is to get the world, it's about the world. It's about changing the world, right? I hope you want to change the world from where you sit, and I do too, getting the world to see that it is just as important to have those non-visible skills. People call them soft skills, and I think that's BS.
Necessary skills. I always say,
right? The necessary skills, the power skills, those non-visible, being tuned into non-visible things. That is just as important as being able to make swift decisions, having hard conversations, problem solving in the moment. I think all of that together it's equally important, and women have the ability to do that, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah, I'm gonna get a little socio-political here for a moment. Please. I think one thing that I notice in my work with workplace bullying is that the emotions we might consider more masculine, like yelling or being gruff or abrasive, we don't tend to call those emotions at all. And obviously I work in lots of organizations where that's what's happening as a workplace bullying expert. But then someone cries, engages in more vulnerable, i.e. feminine emotions, then they're emotional, and that's a problem. Hey, I got news for you. Yelling is also an expression of emotion, but somehow we've drawn this line as a society that those don't count and those are more okay. And that's shifting with, the younger generation coming through and saying, I'm not going to tolerate that. And things like Black Lives Matter. And just there obviously is a lot more attention on what you and I are talking about, that there's all this other stuff that we've celebrated or allowed, in my case, in talking about bullying, that women bring their own version of leadership, and that we can't be just looking at results all the time. That I mean, the people I bully, the people I coach who bully, sometimes I bully them in coaching. They're results oriented.
Yeah.
And that's why the organization's allowed that to happen. But that's not the most important thing necessarily.
Yeah. I will add to that. I did a group training a few weeks ago, and we were talking about emotion. And I asked, how do we feel about emotion? And the first thing that everybody assumed was crying, upset, sadness. And I said, what about laughter?
Yeah.
That's showing emotion and vulnerability. When you laugh with people, when you can joke around, and it's, you're building camaraderie. So it's, yes, like anger and shouting and all of that, outrage, that's emotion as much as sadness and upset, as much as laughter and excitement and exuberance. All of those things are part of the human experience.
Yeah.
And they're necessary. That. Yeah. And I think women are more readily tuned into the nuances of that.
Yes, I love that. I love that I'm sure they all had a super aha moment in that moment. What are some of the things you work on with these women that you're coaching, or what are some of the things you see women, in
Yeah.
general need to be working
Yeah.
on?
So I said at the beginning that the core of purpose of what I do is to help women. And by the way, I'm like on this journey in my own way, working with my own coaches, and is to get more connected to who they naturally are, not necessarily the skills and the strengths or their personality, but just how they be without having to try. Because
Mm,
I think that when we get more connected to that part of us, the part that is so natural that we don't even think about it, like, well, it's just what I do. That's just how I am. That's where your power lies. And the more
mhm,
connected we are to that, then when we make a mistake or somebody disagrees with us or someone attacks us, because that happens to my clients too. I've definitely been attacked in the office. And when we face that kind of confrontation, we're not as thrown back on our heels because we know
mm,
who we are.
mm,
And so how that looks, a lot of times we're dealing with, I want to rebrand this term. Maybe you can help me, but imposter syndrome. I'm
mm,
tired of the term, but I can't think of another word. But the idea that we don't belong in the role that we have, they're going to find us out. I don't have the expertise thing is a big one that comes up. Like, well, I don't
mm,
have the expertise. I don't have the knowledge. And oftentimes the women I'm working with are 20, 25 years, 30 years in their industry and in their business. And I'm thinking, how is it possible that you're not an expert, that you don't believe in your own expertise, right? So we level up like that identity of them being a leader with the their skill set. It's like imposter syndrome happens when our skill set and our expertise is up here, but our identity or our understanding of ourselves is here. And so we're trying to level them out because you were hired for a reason.
mhm,
And oftentimes people see stuff in us that we don't see, right? Which is another great aha moment. But we work on the imposter, we work on the inner narrative, we work on like being able to share your expertise, share your value, and not feel like it's you showing off.
mhm,
Reframing that story. It is very okay for you to express that you know what you're doing. It is
mhm.
okay for you to be right. You don't have to apologize for knowing what to do and for being right and for speaking up about it.
Yeah.
And and it's not about going around and beating your chest. It's simply about knowing who you are. You don't actually have to say a word when you know who you are. I'm sure you've met people. I'm sure you're like this, Catherine. You walk into a room, people just they feel your expertise. They
Mhm.
trust it. It's energetic. That Catherine
Oh,
knows
yeah.
what Catherine knows
Oh,
what she's
yeah.
doing. And there is no reason in the world you shouldn't own that and go, yes, I do. And I always have room to learn and I will continue to learn, but I know my stuff and I feel good
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
And I want to share it. I want to share it with you.
I love that you're saying all of this because, yeah, we all need that. And I'm just thinking, women have to do this in spite of our context that we're in, because I think part of imposter syndrome comes from being told all the time that we're
Mhm.
not competent, or
Mhm.
all of those this is where microaggressions are important, right? That um, if I've been looked over or interrupted or mansplained or feel like my idea was sort of taken, that of course, I'm going to start to feel like I'm not right for the job, or I don't have the expertise, because I've
Yeah.
been getting that subtly for so long. And so I feel like you're really working with women it's like, in spite of whatever happens in the boardroom, you belong there, even if people don't see it. And then I would imagine, as women get more confident, through working with you, that perhaps some of those microaggressions would stop. I don't what do you
I would hope so. But I think we can't control what comes at us. And that's the thing. We can't control what comes at us,
Right,
but we can
right.
only control how we feel, how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive the people around us. And so oftentimes, and I've experienced this and maybe you have too, I will assume that the other is right,
Mhm.
that what
Right.
I'm saying doesn't have merit, doesn't have value. And it's like, why? Why would I assume that? Why would I assume that versus getting curious and going, interesting, differing opinion. Is one right and the other is wrong? Am I wrong? Am I not smart? Why am I assuming that of myself? And so I think that's where that's where we have the control and that's where we can be in charge. Because it's not about women having to do more. It's not about them taming the beast, the patriarchal beast, right? One on their own. Like, it's not like, well, have you tried this and have you tried that and have you tried to appear this way? No, I don't do that. Be more of you. Be as much of you as you possibly can be without trying to prove, because that's where the power lies. It's not in being strategic and trying to like manipulate something and, you know, fake it till you make it. And no, don't fake it till you make it. Be vulnerable. It's okay. And know that that's all right. And know that what you have, your core essence, your inner truth, is where your power center is. So it's just constantly, we're just working on getting connected to that all the time.
Do you see a difference in age group? Because I know, and I feel it too, you know, that once you hit 40 and 50, women, I hear it a lot, that it's like, I stopped caring. I'm just going to be me because now I'm 40 or 50. And do you see that in your work at all? Or,
you know, it's interesting. Yes and no. So like I said, many of the women I coach have been working for 20, 25, 30 years. So they're in their 40s, they're in their 50s. And there's still a piece that is still unresolved for them. There's still some inner dialogue. There's still a piece of that inner narrative and confidence they haven't gotten to. You can be super confident in so many parts of your life, and then there's this one area where it still feels, you know, shaky for you. And then I have worked with a few clients who are in their 20s. And I remember one of them said to me, I don't remember what the scenario was that had come up with work with her, but she said, okay, I mean, I understand, I know it's important, but it's just work. And when she said that, my mind was blown. I was like, yeah, it is just work. It doesn't mean you can phone it in. You still, you know, show up with integrity and do your job, but it is just, it's work. It's not who you are. And that was beautiful. And so I love the younger, this new generation. I guess it would be just sort of the Gen Z and like the Zillennials, I think is another term for that. And the really young millennials, you know, that see things a little bit differently. They take into account a lot of emotion. A lot of the phrases I hear when I say things to them, I feel really seen when you say that. I feel really heard when you say that. And I'm like, okay, they recognize that that's important to be seen. So there are absolutely generational differences. But women are still getting the messages we've been getting from millennia, which is, don't go too far, young lady.
Keep quiet. Yeah.
We're being told what to do, what to think, what's right, what's wrong for us all the time. How can we not succumb to that sometimes? And it's, you know, so that's why getting connected, I keep pointing to my heart, but like getting connected here is like our most powerful resource.
Yeah. Can I offer an alternative?
Yeah,
somebody has a differing opinion. When I love how that younger woman said it's just work, and I think that's a sign of, you know, they move jobs more quickly. They've grown up with the internet, so I could see how there's that flippant feeling, like, well, it's just work, and behind that is like I could just get a different job or whatever, or change careers. But on the other hand, what we do for work is a big part of our self-concept and our self-esteem. So I guess in some ways I'm a little like, oh, I don't know if I want to celebrate that she said it's just work, because despite that it is just work, we spend a lot of time there, and, you know, it's a big part of our identity. And so I don't know. I just wanted to throw that out there.
I see. I'm a believer that all things are true at once. And so I hear truth in what you're saying. Absolutely. We do spend a lot of time in our work. We develop our confidence and our competence and a lot of our relationships, and we learn big lessons and hit milestones through our professional lives. So I think when I heard her say it's just work, it just was refreshing. Like, I'm not going to beat myself up about this. That was the energy around it. You know, I will take it seriously.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So, but you're right. You're absolutely right. Much of our identity comes in the professional sense.
Yeah.
So I agree. All things are true at once.
Yes, for sure. And we have Dr. Patrick Bruce has a comment here. Hopefully someday we will not have feminine leadership or masculine leadership, but just person leadership. Indeed. Also, mansplaining is not an appropriate word to use. If we said womansplaining, it would be inappropriate. So we have another differing view. So mansplaining is not appropriate. Interesting. I've not had anybody say that before. I guess as someone who's been at the receiving end of it many times in my life, I feel like it's a perfectly good word, but I'd love to hear more from you, Dr. Bruce, about it for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And
I think it's
a
little like, what am I trying? I'm going to dig back into my past. I remember I was in my cheerleading squad in high school. Shocker, I know. And there was The Simpsons, had just been, I don't know, The Simpsons are around for I don't know if they came around when I was in high school or before that. But anyway, a woman on my cheerleading squad who was Black was wearing a black Simpsons shirt. And I just remember asking her about it. I've always been into DEI and understanding where other people are coming from. And so we had a really great conversation about why that was appropriate. Obviously, a white person's not going to go around with a white Simpson shirt. So I don't know. I guess I feel like it's a little like that same scenario that maybe, I don't know. I'm going off topic.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. And this is another thing that we coach around. Not everything has to be responded to. Not everything has to be addressed or debated. Yeah. Right? It's like, okay.
Yeah.
and sometimes that's enough. I think, we as people want to feel we have a point of view, and we default to well, no, you didn't understand me, and let me explain myself, and here's why I meant that. And sometimes it's just, we don't need to do that. Sometimes the stuff that comes at us at work, especially with women, it's like, that's interesting.
Yeah. Nice.
And we don't, and I don't actually have to engage with it because sometimes it just isn't helpful. And we have to that's a way of creating boundaries for ourselves. I'm not engaging in this. It's not necessary for me to be in this. And so, so any comments, it's like, okay.
Thanks. I think a lot of coaches, although we all come at coaching for different reasons or have our sort of niche, ultimately we're probably all talking about the same things, because I have those same conversations with my workplace bullying leaders, who are mostly males, but females too. I've definitely had many females along the way. And, they get frustrated because if somebody they feel is being incompetent or makes a mistake, or they can't understand why, I'm the leader, I'm working 50, 78 80 hours a week and no one else is. And we have that same conversation of well, you just have to say, well, that's interesting that person clocks out right at 5. You can't be mad at them for that. Their life is different. But same conversation that I'm having with my leaders who are being abrasive, that you just, sometimes you have to go, well, that's interesting that they do that. I wouldn't do that, but it's nothing wrong with it. And I don't need to attack that person for it. So anyway, well, I'd love to hear, what are some final, maybe give us ladies on the call, one or two more tips for being women in leadership. And then I haven't seen any other questions or anything. It sounds like the video was struggling there for a minute. So I'm sorry all that happened, but so give us another tip or two.
So one of the things that we work on is giving ourselves a moment to pause before we respond to things. So, I've had clients who have been full on attacked, verbally, pushed. And I do think the word mansplaining is appropriate. So I'm going to say that mansplained, and, kind of put in their place, so to speak. And, the question that I get a lot in moments like that is, what do I do? How do I regain my confidence? What's my response? My first suggestion is always, give yourself a beat. Give yourself that 0.5 seconds to collect yourself, so that you don't agree necessarily with what the person is doing or saying to you, because you don't have to agree. You might end up agreeing, but you don't have to agree. So that you don't agree, meaning you don't beat yourself up about it, right? Oh, why I can't do this. I'm whatever our impersonal narratives are, because we all have a version of it. Give yourself a beat. And that beat is as simple as saying what we've been saying. That's interesting. Okay. And that 0.5 seconds allows me to just regroup. Wait, no, I'm not getting swept away on the negative thought train. I'm actually here. I'm grounded. I'm thinking, and I'm giving myself a moment. And then the response there, the after the that's interesting. Ask a question instead of acting on it and saying, well, that's not true, or feeling like we have to defend ourselves or defend the decision that we've made. We can just say, why do you think that? Can you tell me why you think that? Can you tell me where that comes from? Walk me through how you got there. Because then you're making an attempt at a conversation with someone, right? Versus I think this and I think this and I think, and then everybody's trying to convince each other of their, and then one person walks away feeling dejected and just like, oh, I messed up, and they ruminate for days.
Right.
So give yourself a beat. Just use the word, like, even if it's not interesting, just say, that's interesting.
I mean, I think that's a great way to throw people off, because that's not what they expect when you're yelling at them. So yeah, so I can see how that would help. And I agree. Asking a question, actually, a previous business coach had said, whoever's asking the questions is the one with the power, because the other person has to respond, right? Don't have to, but social rules would say that's what happens. So for example, in sales calls, if you're the one asking questions because you're doing the discovery call, then despite the fact that they're doing all the talking, they're going to see you as an expert. You have the power in that conversation. And so I talk about asking a question in microaggressions and stuff as well when we do our upstander training, as we call it, that even just to say, I'm curious, why are you yelling at me right now? So even if you can't get past how they're reacting to you, perhaps, so you can't maybe necessarily get to a point in your brain where you can ask about the content, to just say, I'm curious, or you could say, I'm curious if you recognize that you're yelling at me. And most people are not going to go, yes, I'm yelling at you. They're going to, take the hint. So,
the other thing that I would say, and I'm sure you know this, and this shows up all the time, is that when we are curious, you cannot be judgmental. It is really hard to be curious and judgmental at the exact same time.
Right.
And, because a lot of this stuff comes from judgment. It's judgment of each other, but also we judge ourselves. I did this wrong. I should have done it differently. Why didn't I? Blah, blah, blah. We're human. This is what we do. But if we come at ourselves first with curiosity, why am I reacting this way? Why do I feel thrown back on my heels? Why am I worried about this? Why am I making up stories about this and it hasn't even happened? And the same with the person in front of you. Why? Can you explain to me what that's about? I'd like to understand. I'm trying to, please tell me more. Can you tell me more? Curiosity zaps judgment. And oftentimes we have to be curious over and over and over again to keep the judgment out. It's not a magic wand, right?
Right.
But especially when there's emotion involved. But being curious and giving yourself a beat, just creating that space for yourself, like almost forcing it, like, that's interesting. Like doing those two things, I think can really change the game for you day to day, in everyday conversations, and in moments that might be challenging.
Yep. Yep. I love that. Thank you for these tips. Sophia says, thank you for this. It was a great conversation and message. So thank you, Sophia. You know where to find either of us. And we're both on this LinkedIn page, and it will live here forever. So revisit the conversation anytime you want. Thank you so much, Zovig. It was great to see you again and chat with you. And I loved hearing more about your work. So, and thank you. Anna Maria says, I always have great guests. So thank you. I do indeed. They're cherry picked from the vast world of LinkedIn. So anyway, it was really great to chat with you, Zovig. I appreciate it. And I look forward to building our friendship now and into the future.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks all.